So in its simplest form, whiskey is distilled beer. So we make a beer. There are subtle differences. We're not actually putting flavour into the beer that you typically would with hops and things like that. So if you like, we call that wash, and it's an 8% alcohol. So if you rewind that, the first thing we do is grow the crop of barley, because single malt whiskey means it's using 100% malt barley. So we grow the crop. It's a spring sown crop, so that means it goes in the ground in the spring and is harvested after around about 5 months. And what we're looking for is a crop with low nitrogen content and one that is really easily fermentable. So we send that off to Muntons, who are only 10 miles down the road at Bridlington, and they're our local maltster. And they're set up in this area because we've got some of the best malting barley ground and land in the country. So we're probably in Yorkshire Wolds are probably the biggest malting barley growing regions in the country. So that's why they're there. There is another maltsters as well at Napton, so you can see, why they're set up in this area. That comes back to us and it's ring fenced. So we know when we send them 200 tonnes, our 200 tonnes of malt comes back, and it's ring fenced. So we know the field it's come from, we know how it's been produced, the inputs we put into that crop, the quality of that crop. Totally traceable, totally sustainable as well. And just a quick one on that, we're actually growing that crop to a point where hopefully one day we'll be able to produce a carbon neutral bottle of whiskey, because we're doing things in terms of not ploughing, whereas if you do plough you're releasing carbon to the atmosphere. So we're doing minimal cultivations and growing cover crops in the periods of time when there's no barley, which keeps the nitrogen and more importantly carbon in the ground. So that's one of our long-term ambitions, is to produce something carbon neutral as well, which will be actually the first I'm aware of in the world, if we can do it. And the beauty of that is, because we're in control of those ingredients, we can do that. A lot of the large guys, there is a disconnect between agriculture, the crop, and producing a product, whereas we've linked that all up, which I think is pretty unique. So that's the first point, and then effectively you make this strong beer. We call it wash, it's 8%, we bring it down to the distillery, and then the next process is distilling it twice to get it to a point of 74% alcohol, which is the spirit we put into the cask to mature. Once you've made this liquid, which is called low wines, and then we call it new make spirit, and that's 75% alcohol, it's completely clear. It does have flavour, it does have aroma, and that's what we're trying to keep inherent in that liquid at that stage. But now what we need to do is mature that liquid in a cask, and the choice of cask and cask management is absolutely fundamental to the end product. So you can probably see behind me that there's different colours going on in those bottles, and that's all to do with the cask. So every whiskey goes into a cask that's had a previous occupant. So they're never new casks, they've always had something else in them. And our backstone or backdrop for our house style is a bourbon cask. So they come over from Kentucky, we fill them, they sit in there, they could sit in there for years and years and years, but you've a minimum of 3 to call it whiskey. And so our flagship is predominantly bourbon casks. And then what we can do is we can play about with the casks after that and put the liquid back into a different cask to what we call finish it. So we've got a muscatel finish, we've got a red wine finish, and we'll have lots of other finishes to come in the future, including port. But that maturation is so important, because it's giving you 70% of the flavour and 100% of the colour. So it's absolutely fundamental we get that bit right.